was pretty easygoing.
He was. He was always in a good mood.
Big smiler.
He liked trains. He was a big fan of Thomas the Tank Engine. A few times we would go off to a model train store in Overland and watch the trains run around. It was a tremendous show.
We have railroad tracks by our house too, so he'd be in the backyard outside and he would hear the whistle as they approach the intersection, and he'd just start screaming, "Train! Train!" Sometimes we all like get in the car and run down and just watch the train go by. We thought he had a hernia.
We went down to Children's Hospital. I thought, if it's a hernia, let's get something done about it. And they did a few tests and came back and forth into the room, and then they said, have him drink this contrast. And we pretty much knew what the diagnosis was, that it was some kind of cancer.
The diagnosis was confirmed the next day. The cancer he had was called rhabdomyosarcoma, which was a soft tissue cancer growing out of his pelvis, his left pelvis. All the information we read about it on the internet and everything else basically said 85% survival rate. So we kept thinking, gee, this is a good cancer.
Yes, we're at a great hospital.
Yeah, we were
fabulous
stupid.
Staff. Yeah. We thought we had luck. The day we found out that he wasn't going to live, we simply talked to supportive care, and they stepped over into the hospice mode. It was almost imperceptible, the transition.
When hospice came in the next morning to give me everything and to talk with me, because Matt was still with Addie, they hadn't gotten there to the hospital yet, they reassured me. Deanne said, the first thing we're going to do is get his pain under control. I was like, thank you. It'll be worth it. Just to get him home and give him, 4 hours of sleep. I mean, he's 2.5, he's exhausted. And here we are thinking we have 2 weeks left. How more devastating than to make it 2 incredibly, horribly painful weeks for everybody. It wasn't torturous enough to see him die, but I had to watch him die in pain. I don't think so. I mean, it was hard enough to lose him and deal with losing him than to watch it be harder for him than it already was. So that was what was so great about what hospice was able to do for us, because in controlling his pain, it gave us the opportunity, as strange as it may sound, to make the best of what little time we knew we had left with him. Because, another thing that hospice did was, when we asked the physician, after he told us that Robert was terminal, what was going to happen between now and then, he just said, well, he'll get more and more withdrawn. But when hospice came, they said, well, this will happen, he'll get more withdrawn, and this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen. And it was like you had more to watch for. Doctors are used to trying to save the living. People at hospice were used to trying to help someone transition through dying. And that means not just Rudy, but all of us. And it was a huge, huge confidence booster to have them come in every morning and say, hey, you did great last night. Thank you. Maybe we're getting the hang of this after all. And I think it also helped in people who had been, standing by helpless, who wanted to contribute and wanted to help somehow, were finally able to do that, because we were all together. So they'd come in and they cook our meals, they clean my house. I want them back again for that reason. But, they took care of us, and it gave them the opportunity to do that. It gave people the opportunity to say goodbye to him on their own terms, not because They were in a room, 10 feet by 10 feet, and needed to be ushered in and out, and aware of another patient in the room. I mean, we didn't have to deal with any of that. We were home.
And people were able to be in their familiar, regular mode of living, of being family, rather than the very artificial business of coming into the hospital. It's clean, it's very hard, it's very regimented, and there's a constant stream of people coming by and by. Everyone simply stands there, feels terrible, and says, I wish there was something I could do. At home with the hospice care, people were able to sit down, spend some time, act as their usual selves, and if they needed to leave the area or collect themselves, they could step around the back, completely out of the public view.
His dying at home was less devastating than dying in the hospital would have been for us. I saw other families whose children died in the hospital. It was a horrible thing to watch. You know, sometimes they're there alone. You know, if they were in a situation like Matt and I, when Robert was in and out of the hospital, I was working days, Matt was working nights. Robert would go into the hospital. One of us would be with him every night in the hospital. And it wasn't anything that was shared there. It was coming and going. It was a lot of movement.
A lot of noise, a lot of movement.
And not a lot of quality.
No contact.
It's really scary to think of what you're doing, that you're bringing death into the place where you're all living, and how am I ever going to look at that couch again, and how am I ever going to walk into this room, and how am I ever going to deal with this sacred place that we've created now. And it just was so much easier on all of us. It was so much easier. We got to take care of him through the whole process. It let us move from the hope to migrating towards getting him to the next place as intact as we possibly could.
It's just absolutely the worst thing that I've ever experienced. Completely unbearable. And hospice came in and they made it that much more comfortable. And that really helped a lot. I can't explain how they did it, what exactly it was. They're pros.